Hello, in this video I'll explain to you what are the views in SQL Server. Now, it is a bit of an intimidating topic from what I gather, and it shouldn't be. It really shouldn't be. The views are actually quite easy to use if you know what you're doing, if you know where to sort of get started, and more importantly, if you know what they are meant for, what they actually do. It is a bit confusing, and it definitely can get a bit more tricky if you go to something more advanced, such as using indexes to improve performance of these views. But we won't get into that in this video. We will just take a look at how to set up a view, okay? And I'll explain to you what it is. Now, a view is basically a very fancy stored procedure, right? Or it might be referred to as a virtual table. Now, essentially, it's a query, right? It's a query which usually will have a definition such as a table. It will be almost like a table, but it will have perhaps values from two different tables. But these values will only be retrieved into that view or into that virtual table when it is executed, okay? It does not actually store anything. It doesn't store anything. It's just a query. That's all there is to it. Your data is stored into the tables, and then you use a view to basically retrieve the data, okay? That's what a view is. It's a way to retrieve the data in a different structure than you have it in the tables. It can also be useful to prevent some certain access for certain people. Basically, some security implementations can be implemented, but again, that's going a bit too far, too advanced. We are just looking at the basic implementation of it all. Now, to showcase this example, I have here a couple of tables, okay? A couple of tables created. I also inserted a few rows of data. Not too much, but it will be enough. Now, the first table, table 1 we call it, we have an ID, okay? It's incremented, it goes from 1 to however many numbers you want, okay? And we have that as an integer. Remember, it's an integer, the ID is an integer. It will be important later on, sort of important, but it will be interesting at least. Now, after that, we have test val1, test val2. And that's it. That's all we have in table 1. Now, as for the table 2, we have, again, the ID, integer, right? And then we have table 2, val1, table 2, val2. We have values and the ID. Now, each record, okay, each record will have the same ID in both table 1 and table 2, okay? Now, this is an example, obviously, but in real world, this could be data about a user. This could be data about a product. This could be data about many things. Say, for example, it might be user credentials and user details. User credentials table will contain things like email, hashed password, and basic things that will be required for authentication purposes. But then user details will contain the name, their description perhaps, lots of different things about the user. And there will be times where, say, you need to retrieve a user name, and user email, and then some data about the user. So that's what this thing is useful for. Now, once we get into that, you will see it's not that difficult to do. There are some possible hiccups in this whole arrangement, but I'll explain to you everything. So again, the important part is that the ID in both records would match, okay? It has to match. That's the important part. And also notice the ID here is integer, and here we have integer as well. I'll explain why a bit later, but now let's get to the views, okay? And to create a new view, you can obviously do it as a query, but I find this easier and more efficient. You right click on the view and you click new view, and it gives you a sort of page kind of like a table, okay? Similar to a table table setup, table design, but this is a view. So we need to add tables from which we will retrieve the data. Okay, first we select table 1, we click add, and then we select table 2. Now you can have as many or as little, or as few rather, tables as you want. It's not necessarily 2 or 3 or 4, it could be 5, it could be 1. But you need to add obviously at least one table, otherwise it's not really a view, right? So we added, okay, we added, and as you can see, they pop up like this in a beautiful visual graphical interface. There's nothing better than a proper interface, right? So I close it now, and then we can select a few things, right? We can select a few things. Now, let's say I want to display test thou 1 and table 2 thou 1. So I select both of these, okay? And with that, I want to display the ID for each record, right? So I would just select this ID, okay? Because that one is the same, so I don't need to select that ID in addition. There's no point, right? But we will filter them. So these are the values that will be retrieved into that virtual table. These are the values that will be displayed when this query is executed, right? ID, test thou 1, and table 2 thou 1 from table 2. Okay, so these are the values that will be displayed. Now let's get to the query right here. We get this kind of a table arrangement. It's kind of an interesting one, but you can actually type everything in right here. Unfortunately, this editor right here does not have any kind of an IntelliSense arrangement. It is a bit unfortunate, but there's really not much that we can do. Okay, now the whole query is relatively straightforward. It's relatively straightforward, but the thing we have to look at first is this on. Okay, this may seem like the last thing, but this is actually the most important thing. Okay, this is the most important thing, because this is the part that basically defines your record matches, okay, whether the record matches or not with the records of one table and the other table. This is very important. So this is part of the inner join, okay, but we do on, as you can see, table 1 ID equals to table 2 ID. So this is how we match the record. Basically, the same record is a record with the same ID. And this is why it is important to have matching types. We have integers on both parts. Okay, on table 1 and table 2 we have integer. If you didn't have an integer, it would convert, but that conversion would cost a bit of performance. Now, it will probably won't matter too much, but if you have lots of data, if you have more tables, sort of bigger, bulkier structure, then yes, it will affect the performance, and there is absolutely no reason to waste that performance. Now, there may be places and occasions where you can't avoid that, so you don't really need to worry too much about that. And again, this is getting into something a bit too advanced, but basically, if you can keep the types the same, integer and integer, or nvarchar and nvarchar, keep them the same, keep them matching. Okay, so now let's get to the start of it. This is select, right? This is select. So this is what we select, and this is basically what we selected here to be selected in that query. We have val1, we have test val1, okay, table 2 val1 actually, and test val2 then from table 1, and again from table 1 we have the ID. So this is what we select, and we selected from this arrangement. So it's not from table 1, but it's from table 1 in a join. Okay, it's from table 1 in a join. And you can merge them in a way. Again, this is merges those two tables, and that's what happens. And it merges in such a way that these matching records basically get merged into that same record, right? So you don't have two separate tables anymore. You basically just have one extended table, right? Instead of having 2 columns, now it has 4 columns. And then we simply select it. And you can modify this, but it is a bit inconvenient, as it doesn't have any kind of IntelliSense. Say I write or something like that, and then it doesn't really give me anything. So that is a bit troublesome in that regard, but it's probably the best that you can get, given that you have this nice graphical user interface. So you see we have sort type, for example. Okay, we can sort them. Now we can sort on this, say ascending, and why not? And you see it adds right away order by val1. Okay, we can do that, and why not? And it makes your life a lot easier. And you can add more filters, but again, we won't get into that advanced stuff. We took a lot of time as it is. Now it's time to save it. Okay, it's time to save it. I just clicked Ctrl+S, and this is view, and then you can go from there. Now also, if you're not familiar with SQL Server, you can take a look at my SQL Server course. I go through basics and do some more advanced stuff, how to set up the SQL Server itself, how to deal with some security, how to set up connection strings, also how to interact with SQL Server from C# programming language in a sort of basic way, with no entity frameworks and heavy stuff like that. And with that, I teach how to use files, how to use file table, and how to upload and download the files through and from SQL Server. So lots of things you can learn in my SQL Server course. Do take a look at that. It should be quite interesting, and it won't take too much time as well. So now we don't have the view in the view right here, so we have to refresh. Okay, whenever you create something new, you have to refresh it. That's just the way it goes. Okay, we saved that, and now I can select top 1000 just like I would in a normal table. Okay, and you see I get my return. Okay, I get ID 1, ID 2, and these are the test values. Everything matches properly and perfectly, and you get this execution query. So as you can see, it selects, it actually once again selects values from this new table, this virtual table, or as we call it, the view. Now with that said, we will be concluding this video. Do subscribe to this channel if you want to see more such videos. Also some bit more entertaining videos to come, some interesting projects you can take a look at. Improving Blazor template is one of them. Take a look at how I add real weather forecast into that fake template. Also take a look at my SQL Server course, API development course, and other courses on the Confucian Solution Learning Platform, where you can also submit your exercises for my review. And with that said, we will conclude this video.